Welcome back. I'm playing Warhammer 40,000 Battlesector, and today I'm going to continue on with our videos with my recommended changes for each faction's units here. Overall, I'm pretty happy with where the Necrons are. I know there's a few people that are pretty negative with them, but I think they're actually in a pretty good place. I just want to give this disclosure here before we continue on, because I get a lot of comments with this series, and sometimes when I give these recommended changes, people are like, oh my gosh, if Slytherin made all these changes that you're recommending, it would just totally change the whole faction. It's like, yeah, that's probably true, but I doubt they're going to enact all these changes, and they can pick and choose which ones they like, which ones they don't, and so I give them lots of different options. Certainly, if they were going to change everything, I probably wouldn't even want to do all the changes that I'm recommending either. Likewise, if you do want to report some changes or bugs, Slytherin does have a Discord channel where they collect this information. I've just become somewhat disillusioned with it because I don't see them doing a whole lot to fix a lot of the bugs, so either they're a lot more difficult to fix or it's just not being actively pursued. Now, there are new DLCs coming out for this game, especially this winter. I think they're about to have a new faction release. So there is still the developers are still working on this game, so I'll create a video that goes over my recommended changes, and who knows, maybe some of them will be enacted. And some of the subscribers have been asking me to make these videos specific for each faction. In the past, when I've released these videos, I just kind of have them all combined with multiple factions into one, but people were asking me what I'd recommend for changes, and then they'd be a little bit annoyed when I wouldn't have one for their specific faction. So I figured I'd just go through and make this for each faction specifically, as I was going back through each faction and starting to add some time codes to my unit review videos. And what those are videos where I go through each unit individually, talk about all their loadouts, play a skirmish match with each of their loadouts, show what all of their abilities do, and also show you what the empowered abilities do, because you may not be aware of how it actually functions. And then I also give an example of how I'd use them to build a army force around it to get the maximum potential with it. So if that's something you're interested in, I would definitely recommend that you look over at those videos for further details. But with those caveats here, if you're enjoying these videos, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you. And with that, we'll get started with units that I think need to have some minor tweaking done. So the first one is the Plasmancer here. Now, he's an exceptionally good unit. He costs 250 points, so he is quite expensive, but he's definitely worth it. You know, he's got a pretty good range attack that has 3 splash damage, and you know, he has 3 attacks, so he's going to be good at that. He's also good in melee. You know, he has 60 to 80 with splash damage being 36 to 48 times 3. This actually makes him one of the best melee units in the game and allows him to solo things like Terminators and other hard-hitting units. Now, with his base damage being a little bit low, you won't want to be face-to-face with your opponent, because that's not going to be enough to kill more of those elite units, and they will be able to counterattack you, and he is a little bit squishy. But with that splash damage times 3, my first recommendation is that they kind of decrease that splash damage a little bit, because this guy is very powerful. Now, if he didn't have as good of abilities as he does, then by all means I would say you got to keep him up here because of the sheer amount of cost he has. But with that much splash damage, definitely would turn that down a little bit. And then the other thing that I would change here is, and as far as I know, this is still how it works, but you're supposed to only have 1 ammo for your quantum orb here, and this is the ability why he costs 250 points, because effectively you get to nuke somebody, dealing 112 to 150 damage with an armor piercing of 6 to 1 unit in the center. So let's say I was going to nuke these units here, then everybody around there would be hit with splash damage, because it has a 3x3 tile, and each one of those ones in the periphery would get 30 to 40 with an armor piercing of 3. So that allows you to almost one-shot a lot of different units, and then really smack down a lot of other guys there. And then if he's close enough, you could then end up using the Harbinger of Destruction here, and then end up splashing through and dealing 45 to 60 damage with an armor piercing of 4 with an 80% accuracy to hit all the units along the line that you're attacking with. So, and even more powerful, he has the Tesla Weave, and I actually like this ability, so I'd leave it alone. But I do think you need to make a little adjustments, because with the Quantum Orb only having 1 ammo, you're supposed to be just to hit him once and you're done. But what actually happens is if you empower it, the game has this coded like it's a simple grenade, and how most of the grenades in this game work is if you empowered it, it actually gives you back ammo. And so this quantum orb, when you empower it, you get to cast it a second time, and then the empowered ability I think almost doubles the amount of damage. So being able to do that twice, especially with the second one doing even more damage, just makes these guys incredibly overpowered. Now, it is difficult to get these guys to be able to empower their ability in Surge, because he's going to struggle a little bit to get enough kills unless you put him into dangerous situations, in which case the enemy is just going to focus fire him down. But I don't think my recommendation is that you take away the ability to empower this ability for additional reloads and additional more powerful attacks, because that just feels way too overpowered. And I'm not, like I said, not entirely convinced that's what they wanted to do, because it doesn't visualize that they're giving you more ammo. It just allows you to cast the ability that's empowered. So I think that might be a bug. So I would recommend that that be taken away, just because it makes this guy way too good. The next unit that I would recommend get some changes is the Skorpekh Destroyer. Now, he's gone through several changes over time now, but what I would like to see is that the Hyperphase Threshers get more splash damage. That way, they really feel like something more unique. I mean, this is supposed to be, you know, your anti-infantry, anti-medium tier, while still being able to do some damage to vehicles with armor piercing of 7 damage, whereas your Reap Blades are supposed to be your anti-vehicle and anti-assassination high-value targets. So again, I would just like to see more splash damage being applied to these Hyperphase Threshers here. I think 2 units getting hit with splash damage is perfectly fine given how the attack animation works, but I think that splash damage should be increased a little bit here. It doesn't need to be much because you are getting 3 attacks, but having it 2 to 3 damage, making it 6 to 9 is just not enough. So I'd just increase that just a little bit. And then I'd also like to see the Plasmasite Infusion, the chance to destroy the destroyer, be less than 35%. Now, what do you guys think the best percentage would be for this? My gut reaction would be like a 20% chance, but that might be too low. It seems like the overcharge ability are like 30%, so maybe decreasing that to a 1 in 3 chance instead of a little bit over 1 in 3 chance. But you know, 20 to 25% feels like it would be more accurate, because once you blow up one of these guys, that's a pretty precipitous drop in your damage, and so it doesn't feel good to have that happen. So I would like to see that chance be reduced, because I'm always worried to use that ability because it has such a high chance to cause the death of one of the units. And then I don't find that a lot of other players use these guys very much, because once you drop them and they try to use that ability, then you know you can only reanimate 1 model per squad per turn, and so that just puts you in a really bad spot because the reanimation is only 40%. So if the other one gets dropped and doesn't reanimate, well, now you're almost shit out of luck with these guys, and you definitely didn't get them to pay for themselves. So I would just like to see a little tweaking here. Another unit that I'd like to see tweaked is the Annihilation Barge. Overall, I think all the basic stats and things are fine, but what I would like to see is when you're overwatching, I would like it to be to your default weapon. So if you're going to overwatch, it should overwatch with the Gauss Cannon. Yes, that's a very powerful attack, and they have 4 attacks, but that's what they should do. And then if you're going to spend the, if you're going to have the Tesla cannon, then the Tesla cannon should be the one that overwatches. But the fact that it defaults to like your twin Tesla destructor, that just feels bad. So I would like to see the overwatch be back to the Gauss cannon, and then I think you'll start to see more play with the Annihilation Barge. I think most players are realizing that a lot of matchups, these guys are not paying for themselves. Now once you get them a bunch of momentum and they're healing a whole bunch, especially with their quantum shielding, these guys can really tank a lot of hits. But most of the opponents and other players have learned if you just focus fire these guys down and kill them in 1 turn, then you're just fine and don't have to worry about it so much. So I think by giving it the overwatch with the Gauss cannon here, that would make people be a lot more attracted to using these units again. Another unit that I would like to see, and I guess I'm gonna pretty much say this on almost any unit that has the bodyguard ability here. So for the Lychguard, that is the Guardian protocols. What I would like to see is that it would be activated by either range or melee attack, and that it would be on any HQ unit, not just the HQ commanders. Now, if you want to say, okay, this is going to be range with within 3 tiles, that's pretty amazing. So maybe in this case you may not want it to be all attack types, but for me personally, it's the Guardian Protocol. They're already warping in, so why wouldn't they warp in for a melee versus a range? So I would just like to see them be able to activate that and guard any HQ commander for any kind of attack. I think that would make much more sense. And then you can still use them to have the range of 3, whereas the other factions all have to be within 1 tile of the HQ commander that they're going to be blocking for, which I think is fine. And that also makes the Necrons feel different, and they should be different because, you know, they're a million-year-old race, and so they should be a little bit better at it than all the other factions. So I would like to see that changed for these Guardian protocols here. The next change that I think would work out pretty well is working with the Flayed Ones here. Now, this one, maybe this is a hot take. You guys let me know what you think, because this may make them incredibly overpowered. But with the dimensional translocation, you cannot use this ability into warp into a tile right next to your opponent. And so for me, with the Flayed Ones being so easy to kill, how ideally I'd like to see them work is, you know, you can get 3 tiles, so you're moving them right up to an overwatch, and then you warp around the enemy firing line, and then you just get to flank the units, you start attacking them and just completely devastating them. And so by not having the ability to warp right into the square next to the opponent, if you can't get in there, there's a chance that you're going to be activating a bunch of overwatches, and that kind of defeats the whole purpose. So I'd like to see that restriction that you can't warp next to an enemy unit be removed, and then they can just go wherever they want. And so I think that would lead to a much more tactical play, and I think that would lead to a lot more Flayed Ones being used in the matches here. Now, again, that might be too overpowered, especially with the next change I'm going to recommend, but I just don't like that that's not there, and I certainly don't like that it doesn't specifically tell you that in the description. So if they are going to continue to do this, they need to add that restriction to the ability explanation here so other players know. Now, the other recommendation that I'm going to have is to change the flesh hunger a little bit. I really like this ability. It seems like it should be amazing. You know, you get a 30% chance to, or a 30% increase to your damage against organics, and then you also get +1 armor piercing against organics. So if you're fighting a human creature and you have 4 stacks, you should get 120 damage and 4 armor piercing. So you're taking into account that you start with 5, now you're up to 9, and so they only give you a 60% chance to trigger that ability. Well, it says 60%, it seems like it's much, much lower than that. So I'm not sure if the Death Company is broken currently, but they are consistently maxing out their Black Hunger? I can't think of it. Whatever their Black Rage, that's what it is. Black Rage ability, which is buffing them up, and then they get Hand Flamer, so they can squad wipe a low tier unit and take out, you know, 10 plus models. So then they get to their maximum stacks, they get to attack, and then when they're buffed up, their damage is consistent whether it be an organic or any other unit in the game. Whereas the Flayed Ones here, they are forced to only get the Flesh Hunger to be activated against organics, and then they don't have any splash damage, which I don't think they necessarily should, because, you know, these guys are only 70 points. So it's much harder to get lots of stacks. So, you know, you're theoretically going to kill 3-4 units in most cases here, and so if you're only getting, you know, 2, maybe 3 Flesh Hunger stacks, it's just very hard to get these guys to really be as terrible as they should be. So I would like to see that percentage be even higher for the Flesh Hunger, because it's just so hard to get them up to 4 stacks, because these guys are super easy to kill with their 4 armor, and, you know, flamers, everything else is able to kill these guys, and then, you know, you only get 2 models back at a 40% chance, so these guys can be knocked down pretty easily. So, and the fact that they can't get those bonuses against any inorganic
organic units. That means they're not doing bonus damage to vehicles or other Necrons, you know, things like that, that I would like to see this be buffed up, because the Death Company seems like they're much, much better. Now, the counter argument is the Death Company is more expensive than these guys, but the fact that people rarely are using these units, I think they just need to be tweaked a little bit. So I think if you made this Flesh Hunger be a much better option, and you allowed them to really teleport in better, to really mess up your opponent's firing lines without triggering overwatches, that would make these guys a backbone of a lot of different dynamic matches, and that would be a really fun experience, I think. Now, maybe if they try it out and it's absolutely overpowered, I won't feel that way, but right now I just don't find that they're, in most matchups, they're very viable, and I think that would make them much more viable, and you'd see a lot more play with them. Because, oh, the other thing is, this is a free ability, so for those of you that are been around and playing this game for a long period of time and may have stepped away in the past, this would take your action point. This is now a free ability, just like it is with the death marks. So you no longer have to sacrifice your action point to use the dimensional translocation, and it's only to 3 tiles, whereas before it used to be a lot more. So they've reworked how this ability works, so just take that into consideration as well. So it no longer lets you go like 5-7 tiles where you're warping around the whole map again. So take that into consideration, but I think that would make these guys be a lot better. And then the other unit that I want to see have some changes is the Scarabs. They nerfed these guys, which is good. I think before, having 30 points for a unit that you'd have to effectively attack twice because they'd have 2 models reanimate after you'd squad wipe them, that just felt really bad. So I'm glad they took that away. That was an excellent, excellent change. But what I would like to see is that the self-destruct protocol be more specific. So it doesn't give you a good explanation of what kind of damage you're doing. So I would really like to see it increase the amount of damage and really explain how much splash damage is, because you just need to have some clarification. And I think you should actually make it be pretty decent. Maybe even with a little more armor piercing, so it actually becomes a viable option to just bring a massive Scarab swarm and then just use them as a bunch of kamikazes, because I think that would be very fun. But for the most part, I don't see when or why you would use the self-destruct protocol versus just move them around, attack guys, lock them into the engaged phase, and then cause accuracy penalties. And if they're trying to move around with unarmored units, these guys can sit there and harass them. It just doesn't make sense. So I would like to see them buff up the self-destruct protocol. And in addition to that, I'd like it to be more specific with what exactly you're getting in exchange for your self-destruct, because it just seems like when you're clicking that ability and it shows the damage, it's really not that different than it would be with attacking with the feet or mandibles. So I'd like that to be clarified and see that buffed up a little bit, because I think that could be quite fun to have a bunch of kamikaze Scarab swarms, where it would just be you know, it'd make a lot of sense that if you could just charge them in and kill, you know, spend 3 of them to kill a medium tier unit or something like that, because then you're using 90 points, maybe to be able to take down some of those Seraphim or something, and then you'd still have to be cautious that they're not getting the reaction fire to blow these guys up and lower their damage. Like I said, I think that would lead to much more dynamic gameplay. And then the final change that I would recommend for these Necrons here is I really, really do not like how they nerfed the Tier 1 strategic command point. Yes, it probably was too overpowered for a Tier 1 ability to summon in 2 Scarabs that have 2 actions, because if the back of the unit they're being summoned on is open, then these guys actually do crazy amounts of damage and can assassinate ethereals and, you know, even some Space Marines. So that does not feel good. So I understand why they made it so you only have the 1 attack, but the way they did it is very stupid. So if you want to have them have an attack, you need to select the unit you're going to be dropping these guys on, and then that'll count as a charge attack, and that'll be their action point. But if you just select it on a regular tile, let's say you want to move them to capture some points or get them to be more strategic locations, then if you don't have them do that original charge attack when they're summoned, they don't have an action point. And so it's like, well, what the hell's the point of that? Because if you don't have good range and you don't have a rear to attack, you may not, it won't do any damage. So I think either they gotta keep it with 1 action point when they're summoned in, or you get the charge attack, but maybe you can't do both. That would be fair, but the fact that you don't have an action point if you don't do that original charge attack, that just feels stupid, especially because the Assault Marines get double attacks there, and they get the charge attack, and then they get to use their buff ability and then attack a second time, and they're strong enough to be able to assassinate any squad leader. Now again, that's a tier 2 ability compared to this tier 1, and then, you know, if you use 2 tier 1 abilities, you're summoning 4 Scarabs, so now you can see why they don't want you doing double attacks, because that's 8 attacks that you're getting for that 1 command point. That just gets to be way too much. So I see why they nerfed it, but the way they nerfed it, it's coded weird, and I don't like that you don't have that action point. That just seems very stupid to me. So you need to give them the action point back if you're not doing that charge attack. It can't be you charge or nothing, because then you just don't have an action point. Because what a lot of people would like to do, including myself, is summon them in, and then, you know, you see a weakened unit that's on a strategic command point, then you charge that, and you're hoping that you're gonna overwhelm them and push it off, and then maybe get that strategic command point under the control of the Scarab swarm. Or you want to just move them to get into a position to manually attack a ranged unit and lock them into the engaged situation, whereas you can only do that on one unit if you use that one charge attack, because the charge attack will be on that single unit. So I hope that makes sense, but I'm very frustrated with the way that they made that change, and it doesn't even stay it in the command point ability description. So it's like they made this change, they don't explain it to new players what they're doing, and then the way they do it just doesn't make any sense, and it's just stupid. So please make that better so that's not as much of an issue, because it's very, very frustrating. And with that, those are the changes that I'd recommend for the Necrons. It's a little bit of a shorter video, but that's because I'm actually pretty happy with most of the Necron units. I feel like they've come a long way. They're pretty well balanced. They've got forces that can pretty much deal with almost any matchup other than the Adeptus Sororitas, but that's because they're pretty broken right now. But they feel good for the most part, and I think they're a very fun faction, and I think they're very forgiving for newer players. So I think if they make some minor tweaks like this, I think it'll be an even better faction. If you guys have thoughts about other things that should be changed, let me know. Please comment below in these videos with your thoughts. If I'm full of shit and you think some of these change recommendations are absolutely horrendous, let me know too, and why, because I'm always curious to know what other players' perspectives are. But those are kind of my main thoughts with this faction right now. And I will continue to make some videos for my recommended changes for every faction. It may take me a little bit of time to complete this series, as I'm slowly making my way through reviewing the videos from those unit review guides to add time codes. I'm just writing down little comments and on a piece of paper that are things that I would recommend for changes when I go back and see that match. So with that, I'm going to sign off for the day. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you. Have a great day.